want to do for the rest of today's session is share some ideas with you that I have found incredibly valuable in my own life. And this is sort of what I call life advice. Probably unrelated to real estate, but I think it's incredibly valuable. I call it the challenge of life, and it's the power of personal development. And my goal for this is hopefully you will take something away that you can use in your daily life long after you've left here. And one of the best ways that I know to sort of teach the power of personal development is to share some of my story and how early on in my life I had an opportunity to get exposed to a philosophy of personal development that changed every aspect of my life. Now, when I was 22, things had not worked out exactly the way I thought they would. Now, some things have gone really well, but some things hadn't. As most of you know, I grew up in Wyoming, joined the military. The Marine Corps sent me to El Toro, which used to be a Air Force base, or a naval air station there with a runway and everything where the Great Park is now. And I realized I loved California, so I got a real estate license, and I started selling real estate while I was still in the Marine Corps. And I started doing pretty well. But along the way, I made some mistakes. First of all, one of the mistakes I made was at the ripe old age of 18, I got married. Not probably the brightest move in my life. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I'd already been selling real estate, so I started doing well, and I started making quite a bit of money. And money and immaturity are not a good combination. What do you think the biggest challenges are if you start making quite a bit of money and you're not very mature?
You spend it all more than you save.
You do stupid things. So.
Yeah, stupid things.
And I found that right after I had turned 21, my wife asked me for a divorce. Now, this was a little bit of a shock to me. I thought, well, gosh, I'm making lots of money. But she wanted something totally different in life than I did. She wanted to go back to her small hometown. I wanted to stay in California. And we realized that we did not have anything really in common of what we wanted out of life. Then, I had a couple of years where I had made very good money selling real estate, and I thought, well, I know everything there is to know. And so at 21, I also bought a real estate company. And probably didn't understand the value, so I way overpaid for it. But now at 21, what kind of a manager, a leader do you think I was? Arrogant.
Inexperienced?
Arrogant, inexperienced. In a word, bad. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I bought a real estate office. When you buy a real estate office, basically you buy all the agents there, but they can leave at any time they want. And they started leaving very quickly, and as they left, the money that I was generating went down, and yet I still had to pay the person I was paying this company, buying it from, their money. And by the time I was 22, I found myself divorced and broke. And basically at a point where I almost had to declare bankruptcy. Fortunately, I was able to basically pay somebody to take over the real estate company that I purchased because they could attract new agents. And so things were not working out exactly the way I thought they would. I had gone from what I thought was incredible success to incredible failure very quickly. Now, as I looked at all these things, who do you think I thought was responsible for how things were going? And this is something that's really important to think about. Fortunately, at that time, I ended up going to a number of Jim Rohn seminars. And Jim Rohn was a personal development speaker, trainer out there. And in a seminar, he said, let me give you the great promise of life. He says, you can have more than you've got because you can become more than you are. And this is truly an amazing promise to life. You can have more if you become more. Now, the challenge is you have to be willing to become more. Now, fortunately, we've all heard the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And for me, I was at a point in my life where I was willing to listen to other people's ideas. I was willing to look for answers that I couldn't find out there. And Jim said something very interesting to me. He said, what holds most people back from really accomplishing great things in life is that they're living off of a faulty philosophy. Now, I never thought about philosophy. I can't say I ever took a philosophy class at that point in my life. I thought, well, I don't even have a philosophy. And Jim said something interesting. He said, we all have a philosophy that we are living by, whether we're aware of it or not. And he said, unfortunately, when we have a philosophy, it affects every aspect of our life. So the question is, what is philosophy? And who here can tell me, what is philosophy?
Well, doesn't philosophy mean the love of knowledge? Like Phil, love, song is knowledge, right?
I can't say I've heard that definition of philosophy before.
Well, in this context, I mean, philosophy would just be your way of living, like your own idea on how to live life.
And that's really what it is. Philosophy is an activity that we live by. And it's trying to understand what are the fundamental truths about the world, about ourselves and our relationship to the world. Now, whether we give it conscious thought or not, we all are actually acting based on our personal philosophy. Whatever is driving us forward. Your philosophy today is a combination of everything you've learned, all your experiences, and then a decision on what you have chosen to believe is true. And Jim says, unfortunately, a lot of people don't think about it, but they believe things that are basically not true. And if you have a philosophy based on things that are not true, things will not turn out well for you. Whether your philosophy is based on truth or things that are totally erroneous, it is impacting your life every single day. Now, if you want to understand your philosophy, look at what you do, not what you say. Our philosophy is revealed by our actions, the things we do each day. Now, unfortunately, a lot of us did not consciously create the philosophy we live by. We picked it up by default, by watching our parents, watching our peers, our group that we are around. Fortunately for me, Jim shared a philosophy. He said, here's a philosophy on how to build a happy, successful life. And he gave some ideas, some insight. Now, fortunately at the time, I seized those ideas. I took them to heart, and I actually went to work at applying them consistently. And here's what I want you to know. Hearing a good idea won't change your life. Applying a good idea will. And the difference between hearing or understanding and applying is huge. So let me ask you, what do you think makes life worthwhile? What is it that will make you happy so that you have a full life? I'd love to get some feedback here. What do you think it takes to make a happy, successful life?
Have purpose.
Have purpose, okay? What else?
Working in a field you're passionate about.
Working in a field you're passionate about.
Staying healthy.
Staying healthy.
Having relationships.
Having a relationship. Anything else?
Community.
Having a community that you feel part of. See, and all of those things create a life that's full of joy and happiness. But here's what I really want you to think about. Joy and fulfillment come from what you can do for others, not what you get for yourself. And this is something we tend to learn only when we are much older, unless we give it some conscious thought. Unfortunately, when we're young, we're focused mostly on what's in it for me. What can I get out of it instead of what can I give to it? What can I do for others? But if you really want to have a happy life, it's asking yourself, how can I make a contribution? What can I do for the people I care about, for my community, for the people that are around me that will make the biggest difference in their life? Jim, fortunately, forced me to look at some things that were a little hard to confront. Now, after I'd gone to a few of the seminars, I ended up staying afterwards one night and started talking to Jim. And Jim and I sort of hit it off, and he offered me a job. And for the next few years, I actually went to work for Jim, and it was truly life-changing because I had an opportunity to spend time with him, and he forced me to look at things that I probably wouldn't have looked at any other way. And he said, Greg, why do you think your life has not turned out the way you wanted it to? Why do you think your marriage failed? Now, when he asked me why I thought my marriage failed, what do you think I said?
You blamed her.
Well, of course. It was her fault. No. She came out to California, wanted to go back. She didn't want the same things. It was all her fault. When he asked me why my real estate company failed, what do you suppose I said?
Blaming employees.
It was all those agents that left, didn't appreciate what I brought to the table. And the economy, interest rates have gone up from about 7% to about 12% at that point in time. You know, it's the government's fault. And I had this whole list of reasons why things had not turned out. The government, the economy, my lack of education, and my negative relatives. Now, all my relatives are farmers, ranchers, and my father's a minister, and they all live in the Midwest. And they thought California was, where the devil went to live. And, you couldn't succeed in California because the influences were so negative. And so I said, they're not supportive of me. Now, and then there's inflation, and there's high prices, and these interest rates have gone crazy. And all of these things were my excuses that I blamed. Now, as I went through this list with Jim, Jim actually made me write this list out. And we talked about each one of these things. As we talked about each one, what do you think he did? When I said the economy went into recession, and that's why my real estate company failed, now, what do you think he did? What do you think he said to me? What would your guess be? I know you guys are bright, you can guess, yes.
Maybe something along the lines of other people have companies that didn't go under.
That's exactly what he said. He said, now, Craig, this is interesting. He said, were there other real estate companies in the same recession that succeeded? I said, well, yes. He said, now, they had the same interest rate problems, the same economy problems, and they succeeded, and you failed. So everything was the same except different ownership. So where do you think the problem probably was?
The ownership.
And for every excuse they had, he was ruthless at getting me to admit that I was the problem. He forced me, he got rid of every one of my justifications. He said, the biggest problem with your list is that you are not on the list. And he said, Greg, I actually think that you're the only problem that you need to be worried about on your list. Now, I'll tell you, this was hard for me to hear. I remember this particular day, I almost quit working for him. I thought he was just mean. I thought, oh, it's all these other problems. It's all those things that are causing the problem. But he said, Greg, here's the good news. The major key to your better future is you. And if you're the problem, you can get better. He said, let me ask you something, Greg. If your life is determined by the government, what is your chance as an individual of changing the government? Roughly. I said, well, not that good. He said, that's true. He said, so now, if you can't change the government so that you get better, what are you going to do? He said, you have a choice. You can decide to change yourself or worry about all the things you can't change. He said, most people spend their life trying to change things that they will never be able to change. He said, Greg, let me ask you this question. If you spent the next 5 years working on all your negative relatives' attitudes, do you think you could change them so that they would all become so positive about California they'd want to move here? I said, probably not. He said, so why would you waste even one more breath trying to change their attitude? I said, I don't know. But I kept doing it. He said, you've got to understand this. He said, the major key to your better future can't be the government. It can't be all these other things out there. It's you. And he said, first of all, you need to understand the setup of life. And I tell you, it's important to understand that. If you want to have a happy, successful life, you've got to make sure that you understand how life operates. And he said, the first thing is to start by refining your current philosophy of life. And he said, the first thing I want you to know about refining your philosophy is that you've got to be a student, not a follower. And I pass that along to you as some excellent advice. Jim said, Greg, I'm going to share with you some ideas, but I want you to know they are my ideas. You have to decide whether you're going to adopt them. You're going to have to decide what's important to you. And in everything in life, we have to take responsibility for what we decide we are going to do. And the only way to do that is to be a student. Listen to voices of value. Listen to people you respect. Go out there, study, look at it, and then decide for yourself. And it's only when you make your own decisions can you actually start to grow. But unless you come up with your own conclusions, you'll end up doing things that you wish you would not have done. He said, think about some of the faulty philosophies that people have. He said, have you heard this statement that says, what you don't know won't hurt you? He said, that is not true. He said, what you don't know will hurt you. And you need to be aware of this. He said, think about sugar and cyanide. He said, if somebody puts a teaspoon of sugar in your coffee, will it hurt you? Probably not. We can get a whole debate on, the value of sugar or the negative effects of sugar. But if somebody puts a teaspoon of cyanide in your coffee, what's going to happen?
You're going to get poisoned and die,
It's going to kill you.
of course.
It only takes about a quarter of a teaspoon of cyanide to kill you. You put a whole teaspoon in, it's pretty much over. Now, what if the cyanide got into your coffee accidentally? Would it still kill you? What if the sugar got there accidentally? Probably not going to have an impact. Unfortunately, instead of focusing on, gosh, how do I, be aware of if I have sugar or cyanide, we're worried about how it got there. The reality is a gentle nudge in the wrong direction is all it takes to get off track. Your best friend says, hey, you know what? Let's just go party here. Let's try this drug. Let's try this. And it doesn't seem significant at the time, and it's just little nudges, little things, and we keep going further and further off track. And one day we wake up and say, how did I end up here? It's so easy to get nudged off track unless we are consciously thinking about what we're doing. What's impacting us? The reality is, in this world, it's a push-shove world. Things are always competing and pushing for us. The bugs and weeds attack every garden. If you sifted all the dirt out there, got rid of all the weeds, did everything you could possibly do to create a perfectly bug-free, weed-free garden, what will still happen?
They'll keep coming back.
The bugs and weeds will still keep showing up. I have a question. When in life do you think you are going to be problem-free?
Never.
See, unfortunately, so many of us act as if, well, someday I'm not going to have any problems. When I make X number of dollars, when I get this, guess what? The more money you make, the more problems you get. You just aren't aware of those problems until you make the money. There are problems at every step of the way. Unfortunately, we forget this. It's a push-shove world. You can call it the battle between good and evil, but everything is always going to be attacked. Sickness is always pushing at the edges of your health plan. And we don't think about this, especially when we're young. We don't think, gosh, what's the impact of my current health plan? Will it take me where I want to go 30, 40, 50 years from now? Now, the research shows that for every cigarette you smoke, it takes about 2 minutes off your life. For every beer you drink, about 10 seconds. We say, oh gosh, that doesn't seem like much. But now you add that up over 10, 20, 30 years, and it deteriorates the quality of your health. See, everything is pushing there. Poverty is always testing your wealth plan. And I want you to think about what your plan is for developing wealth. See, here's the reality. All values must be defended. And we've got to defend them at every level. Whatever we don't defend, whatever we don't use, we lose. And this is an important concept to understand. Let's say you get yourself into great shape. You know, incredible shape, and all of a sudden you say, well, now I'm in perfect shape, I don't need to exercise anymore. How long does it take for you to get out of shape?
1 month.
About a month and a half. And how long does it take to get back to that same shape?
6 months. Year.
A lot longer. See, and this is what we need to understand. Whenever we stop focusing on the things that matter, it makes a huge difference. We've all heard about the law of sowing and reaping. Whatever we put out in life, we're going to get back. Now, I didn't quite understand this. Jim said, Greg, one of the ways to understand the law is whatever you're currently reaping is a reflection of what you've sown in the past. I said, well, I didn't sow seeds to destroy my marriage. He said, well, Greg, let me ask you this. Before you got married, how many books on marriage did you read? Now I got married at 18, so how many books on marriage do you think I had read? None. 0. He said, Greg, when you got married, did you tell your new wife about your vision for California and staying there for the rest of your life? I said, well, no, I hadn't even lived there yet. As you fell in love with California, how much did you tell her that you wanted to live here forever? I said, well, at the first I didn't start telling. He said, so you sowed the seeds that eventually became problematic. And he talked me through, I realized that I had done little things along the way that had created all the problems that I was currently facing. Unfortunately, I had not wanted to admit that I had created the problems, because it was so much easier to keep blaming others. And he said, another thing to understand about the law of sowing and reaping is you always reap more than you sow. So if you put out some negativity, you're going to get a lot more negativity back than you put out. If you sow a lot of good things, you're going to get a lot more good things back than you actually put out, but you need to understand it. And he said law is positive and negative. So when you're doing things that have negative consequences, whether it's for your health, your wealth, whatever it is, understand it's going to come back multiplied. And he said the problem is there's always a passage of time between what you put out and what you get back. And he says that makes it hard for us to see the connection sometimes. But the more you think about it, the more you'll realize it's true. Now, he said this is also true of this planet. He said on this planet, sometimes you will sow extremely well, and sometimes you'll still lose. It's just that kind of a planet. The farmer is an honorable man. Plants his seeds in the spring, waters them, nourishes them all summer long. The day before he's going to harvest, it hails. His crop is beat into the ground. Is that fair? Probably not. But it happens every now and then. We make some mistakes, we do things, and every now and then, even though we did everything right, we could still lose. Now, it's that kind of a planet. We may not like it, we may not think it's fair, but it is that kind of a planet. Now, here's the good news. There are many ways to sow and many ways to reap. And here, in Orange County, California, you have so much incredible opportunity. I have a question. If you can't do well here in Southern California, where are you going to go for better odds? You can say, oh, gosh, if I could just make it to Bangladesh. If I could live there, I'd have more opportunity. Anybody know what the average annual income in Bangladesh is?
It's way less than California.
It's about $1,800 a year.
It's another country, yeah.
I mean, to think about it. That's hard. We have so much opportunity. There is so much place. There is so much money, so much capital, so many opportunities. If you can't find a way here, understand, you might as well give up. There is so much. And here's the good news. Anyone can sow, so anyone can reap. You all have the opportunity to go and do whatever you want to with your life. Now, here's the reality. If you don't sow, you don't have a chance. If you don't go out there and try, put yourself in the marketplace, into the challenge of life, it's not going to turn out well because you just didn't even try. Then, when you reap well, understand it's because what you put out. If you didn't, understand that that's because you didn't put out the effort. So learn to harvest without complaint when the amounts are small, and harvest without apologize when the amounts are large. You should never begrudge anybody for their success. Also, take full responsibility for the results in your life. This is the mark of true maturity. Taking responsibility for everything in your life is what makes you a true adult. This was a hard lesson for me to learn. Shortly after I'd gone to work for Jim, my ex-wife showed up at his office one day and asked to see me. I spent about 10 minutes with her, and it sent me into a tizzy. She wanted to change some of our divorce agreement. And I thought it was because she was bad, mean, terrible, all these things. And Jim could see that it had really affected me. He called me into his office. He said, Greg, let me ask you a question. How long do you want your ex-wife to control your attitude and mood? I said, well, not another minute. He said, well, then why are you giving her the power over your entire life? I said, well, she's doing this, and she's doing this, and doing this. He said, well, that's a story you're telling yourself. Do you know absolutely 100% that that's her motive? I said, well, I can't imagine another one. He said, well, then you don't have much of an imagination, do you? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, can't you imagine that there's some motive that would make you feel good about it? I said, well, like what? if she would have walked in here today and said she wanted to change this because her parents had just been diagnosed with cancer, and she needed the changes because she wanted to go and help them, would have you been upset? I said, well, no, I'd probably support that. He said, so tell yourself that story. I said, well, I don't think it's true. He said, well, the other story that you're telling yourself about her being mean and vengeful and everything else, is that true? I said, well, I think so. He said, well, how do you know? I said, well, I don't. He said, well, I have a question. You have two stories. One makes you happy, one makes you unhappy. You don't know if either of them are true. You have no evidence. So which story do you want to tell yourself? The one that will make you happy, or the one that will make you unhappy?
The one that will make you happy.
He said, why is it so hard for you to choose the story that will make you happy? He said, because I don't know if it's true. He said, but you don't know the other one is true either. He said, this is the story of so many people's lives. They're worried about what other people think about them, what the judgments of other people, and it has absolutely no impact on their life. He said, isn't that crazy? To be concerned about things that cannot even impact your life. He said, you've got to take responsibility for your emotions. He said, until you can learn how to control every emotion you have, you are not fully an adult. And he said, unfortunately, that's why the most people never become adults, even in old age. He says, this is the mark of true maturity. And he said, this is true of everyone. Whether people are aware of it or not, we've got to decide whether we're in control. He said, if you really want to be happy and successful, make it a study. Whatever you want in life, study it. He said, if you want to be happy, study happiness. If you want to be successful, if you want to be wealthy, study wealth. If you want to have influence, study influence. Study communication. He said, Greg, maybe the best way I can help you at this point in your life is to help you review your plans for what you want to get out of your life. And he said, Greg, let's meet tomorrow, and I want you to bring me your current written plan for achieving financial independence, and we'll review it together. Now, when he asked me to bring my current plan for achieving financial independence, I was age 24. What kind of a plan do you think I had? Written down that I could take to him. So let me ask you this. If I asked you to bring me your written plan for achieving financial independence, how many think I would be totally blown away with how great your plan was? Why not? You're adults. When do you think a plan is going to come your way? And who's responsible for creating the plan?
You.
See, this is one of those interesting things. I didn't have a plan. I was using the cross-finger method. When I told this to Jim, he said, well, maybe let me just ask you some questions. He said, how much money are you putting aside to invest with each month? Now, I was 24, I'd gone through a divorce, almost bankruptcy. I was now working on a salary job. How much money do you think I was saving every month, roughly? I bet you can guess. That's it. Anybody else about like that? Then he asked me an interesting question. He said, Greg, if you keep saving that amount of money each month, how long do you think it will take you to become financially independent? Now, what do you suppose I had to say? I said, well, Jim, never. Here's my question for you. If you keep following your current plan to become financially independent, how long will it take you? I said, well, Jeremy, you don't understand. Rent is expensive, and this is expensive. I don't have money to save. He said, you've got to make a decision whether you want to become financially independent someday, or if you want to have a few years of fooling yourself, living beyond your means. And I said, Greg, so who sold you on the philosophy that you are currently demonstrating on building wealth? I said, well, nobody sold me that philosophy. He said, well, somebody convinced you not to save money, not to invest money. Oh. I said, well, and he said, you did really well. You made a lot of money selling real estate. How much did you invest? I said, well, not any. So he said, who sold you on that philosophy? Because your philosophy is demonstrated by what you do. And he said, here's the good news. You can change your philosophy. He said, remember that wealth is built by plan, not hope. He said, even a person with a small income can build wealth. I said, well, how's that? He said, let me give this simple formula. No matter how much you make, learn to live on 70% of your net income. I said, well, Jim, if I lived on 70% of my net income, I'd have to give up my nice apartment and live in a place that wasn't nearly as nice. I'd have to sell my car and get a cheaper one. He said, that's true. He said, that's the price of becoming wealthy. He said, unfortunately, that's the price most people are not willing to pay. They would rather fool themselves by looking good today and sacrificing their long-term future. I said, well, I don't like that. He said, Greg, understand that wealth is not determined by how much you make. It's determined by what you do with your income. He said, that's why there are so many people that make extraordinary amounts of money that end up broke. Think about all the people we've seen. Oh, Allen Iverson made $450 million from the NBA and endorsements. And today, he's broke. How did that happen?
Being foolish.
Mike Tyson has earned almost $1 billion in his life. And he's broke. I want you to think about it. It's not how much you make, it's what you do with your income. He says, if you live on 70% of what you make, and now you do that consistently, you can become incredibly wealthy. There was a school teacher in New York City that lived on 70% of their income. They invested 10% of it every year, saved 10% for emergencies, tithed 10%, and they did that for 30 years. And when they're retired as a school teacher, their net worth was $36 million and never made more than $50,000 in a year. Because they started early and they stayed consistent. It's the philosophy that makes a difference. It's not how much money you make. Unfortunately, we tend to think, well, gosh, when I make more money, I can save more. As soon as you start making more money, what will you probably do?
Spend more money.
The same thing you're currently doing with your income.
Not me.
It's, you start saving early. And then Jim said, well, Greg, besides money. He said, money is one thing, but it's not the key to happiness. What else do you want in your life? What is essential for you to have a happy, successful life? I said, well, I want a great love relationship. I want to have a marriage that really works. He said, well, Greg, that's not hard to do. So let me ask you, Greg, what's your plan to create a great love relationship? I said, my plan is to meet somebody great. He said, well, Greg, that's not really a plan. That's sort of a hope. He said, are you going to leave that to the luck of the draw? He said, well, tell me about the person that you want in your life. I said, I want her to be successful and smart and, wealthy and all these things. He says, so Greg, let me ask you, if a super attractive, smart, successful woman met you right now, would she want to date you? I said, well, probably not. He said, so what are you going to do? What are you going to become to attract the person that you want in your relationship? And he said, how much work are you willing to spend to develop the skills to have a great relationship? How many books have you read? How many marriage seminars have you attended? I said, well, I'm done. He said, when I get married, I'll read some marriage books. He said, that's the problem. Then it's too late. He said, you need to start reading them now. In fact, he gave me a relationship book that day called Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Really Am? He said, here's a book to start you on this path. And he said, I want you to make sure that you're reading at least 1 or 2 marriage books a year long before you get married. And he said, I've got a good friend that does marriage seminars. I think you should go to one before you get married. Before you even start dating. I said, wow. And I will tell you, a year later I went to my first marriage seminar. As a single person, I was the only person there single. People thought I was a little weird. But a year later, I did meet this incredible superstar lady. Convinced her to marry me. We just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. And it has been an incredible ride. And it is a relationship I cannot believe. But we put in the time up front. Unfortunately, those things don't happen by accident. If somebody says they want to have a successful relationship, but they haven't read a book on successful relationships, would you say they were serious about having a successful relationship? Would you?
Depends.
Their actions are saying what? Not really. If somebody says, I want to be rich, but they haven't read a book on becoming wealthy, they probably aren't that serious. See, Jim said, Greg, look at the people in your life that you admire, that you think have the relationships that you want, that have the wealth that you want. Take them out to dinner and ask them how they did it. And I will tell you, this started changing every aspect of my life. When I met people that had a great relationship, I asked them, what's the key? What do you suppose the commonalities were? I found the people that had great relationships actually worked on them. They read books, they went to counseling, they took marriage seminars. They don't happen by accident. So ask yourself, what's the type of person you need to become to attract the person you want in your life? Then Jim asked me, Craig, what's the number one thing that you would like to contribute during your lifetime? He said, success is not something you pursue. It's something you attract by the person you become, by making a contribution, by making a benefit. And he said, here's the truth. Craig, for you to change, you have to change. And if you're not willing to change, that's okay, but things are not going to change for you. He said, also learn how to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Now, I grew up on a farm, got that work ethic beat into me, work hard on your job. Never told, work hard on yourself. And Jim said, this is where so many people go wrong. They work harder on their job than they do on their skills, their personality, the things that make a difference in life. He said, if you work hard on your job, that's probably a good thing, but I want you to think about what you're doing to yourself at the job. He said, over the long run, the quality of your life rarely exceeds your personal development. And if you work harder on developing yourself, your life will be so much better. And he said, it's not what happens in your life that actually determines the quality of your life. It's what you do about it. He said, everybody has the happenings, everybody has challenges, problems. It's how we meet them, how we respond to them that makes the difference. He said, Greg, stop wishing for less difficulty and wish you had more skills. Because if you had more skills, things would not be as difficult. And here's the great promise, if you will change in your life, everything will change for you. And personal development is truly the only way to tap into your full potential as a human being. Here's an interesting thing to think about. If you ask somebody how much do they currently make, what do most people tell you? They'll say, well, I make X dollars an hour. I made X dollars last year. They'll tell you their salary. But if you're making $20 an hour, what are you getting paid for? See, and this is important to understand. You're getting paid for the value you put into the hour, not the hour. See, if you're getting paid for the hour, they just send you your money and you could stay home. You're getting paid for the value you put into the hour. Now, once we understand this, we'll realize that we have to make sure that we're focusing on the extrinsic value we put into our job And we don't confuse that with the intrinsic value that we have as a human being. When people confuse intrinsic and extrinsic values, it gets into trouble. Every person, every one of us is intrinsically valuable as a human being. Now, we have value just because we are alive as a brother, a father, sister, person out there. Now, the intrinsic value can't be increased or decreased by anything we do or do not do. You can be homeless and say have the same intrinsic value as a billionaire. It doesn't matter. When we confuse intrinsic value for extrinsic value, it's a destructive force. It leads to all kinds of prejudices and negativity. The reality is that we all need each of us on the planet, and yet each of us needs all of us. Then the key to remember is that the value you get paid at a job is determined by extrinsic forces in the market. Once we understand this, here's the question: is it possible for you to become twice as valuable in the marketplace? Do some people get paid $40 an hour and some people get $20? So what's the difference? Is the person a better person?
No.
No, they're intrinsically the same person, they have the same value, but extrinsically, the marketplace values what one person does more than the other. Why has Taylor Swift earned $1 billion? Because the market values the entertainment she provides. Now, is that a good thing, a bad thing? I don't know, but the market values that, so we understand there are certain things the market values, and if I want to increase my value to the marketplace, I need to look at what the marketplace values, not what I value. And this is so important to understand. So is it possible for you to become 4 times more valuable? Is it possible?
Should be.
Some people, instead of making $20 an hour, do they make, $80 an hour?
On the ladder.
And understand that it's possible to become 10 times more valuable, 100 times more valuable. Even in the same profession. Do you know here in Orange County, some lawyers charge $100 an hour, some charge up to $10,000 an hour. Now, what's the difference? A lawyer that charges $100 an hour versus $10,000 an hour. Did they get different educations? No, they both passed the bar. But one figured out how to become more valuable in the marketplace based on what the marketplace values, not what they value. Now, here's the good news. It's called a ladder of success. And there's a whole bunch of debate about going on whether, should minimum wage be lowered or raised. Now, I don't want to get into the debate, but here's the question. The only reason we talk about it is that if somebody was get onto the ladder and never climb, say, well, I'm going to get this minimum wage job and I'm never going to do anything else, then I'd be really concerned about minimum wage. But if you're willing to climb, guess what? Are you going to stay at minimum wage long? At 14, I took my first job at Shakey's Pizza at minimum wage. Now, I was willing to work hard. It did not take me long before I got a raise. And I want you to realize it's all about working to climb. If you find a way of helping lots of people get what they want, you will get everything you want in life. Now, I probably shouldn't say this as a college professor, but formal education will get you a job. Self-education will make you a fortune. We get a degree to get a job, but if we want to make a fortune, it's about what we do with our own personal development. So here's the keys to creating wealth. Bring great wealth, bring great value to the marketplace, and then have a plan for what to do with your money. First of all, make a commitment to always do more than you get paid for. Let's say you go to work for a job that does not appreciate you. But they don't watch you that closely. And one guy says, gosh, I can show up to work 30 minutes late, they don't notice, leave 30 minutes early, and I still get paid, I've got it wired. Who's the first person that's going to get laid off when a recession comes? That guy. On the other hand, if you go to work and you say, gosh, they're paying me $20 an hour, I'm probably worth 40, but you know what? I'm going to make sure I give them $40 an hour of work, even though they're only paying me 20. If you give more than you get paid for in every job you do, what happens as a result of that? Do you think people will take notice? Do you think opportunity will come your way? See, it's a philosophy. Why should I work hard when they don't appreciate me? It's not because they don't appreciate you. It's because you are responsible for yourself when you're going to say, I have a philosophy that says, I'm going to always give more than I paid for. I'm going to do more. Gosh, if my professor says this is the minimum standard, I'm going to do more. That's a philosophy. It's a choice that you make. Here's one of the great things. I didn't get my education till I was in my 40s. And when I got my education, I valued it. And I wanted to be the best student any professor ever had. So I always did more. That's why I graduated with the highest of honors. Why? Because I committed from day one to do my very best. My question for you, are you committed to getting the very best from your education? And if I looked at your activities, what you did every day, would that come out in your philosophy? Those are the things that make a difference. Focus on helping others first. When you focus on yourself first, it always tends to shortchange you. And we get whatever we focus on in life. Whatever we focus on in life expands. And the question is, are you focused on the abundance out there or the scarcity? See, a philosophy of scarcity says, gosh, it's hard, it's difficult, it's unfair. That person has more time, more money, more opportunity. I wish it was different. I wish I had their money. I wish I had their parents. I wish I had their opportunities. On the other hand, you have a philosophy of abundance that says, gosh, there is so much opportunity out there. Think about all the opportunity I have here in Orange County. And realize that you can take advantage of it all. Be grateful for everything that you have in your life. In Jim's seminar, he had this exercise. He said, I want you to write down a list of what you are grateful for in your life, what you're proud of, what you're happy about. Write down a list of everybody who loves you. Write down a list of everybody who you love. Now I went to work for Jim, and for 2 years I traveled around the country with him, watching him do his 4-hour personal development seminar about 4 times a week. And in almost every one of those seminars, he went through this exercise. And a couple of times I made a little bit of a list about what I was grateful for, but I never really did the whole exercise. Listening to it time after time for 2 years. Then Jim retired, and I went back to selling real estate, started doing well, started a variety of companies. A few years later, I ran across a book called Super Self. It's a personal development book. And in the book was Jim's exercise. I said, wow, he stole it from Jim. A couple years later, I read Tony Robbins' book, Unlimited Power. And sure enough, in Tony's book, he has got the exercise. I said, well, that makes sense. He used to work for Jim long before I did. A couple years later, I ran across a bunch of writings by Emerson. And Emerson wrote an essay on gratitude, and I think it was in 1890. And he's got the exercise in his essay. I said, man, this exercise gets around. Jim probably stole it from Emerson. About a year later, I ran across a book, and he had a quote from a 13th century monk that had the exact same exercise in it. I said, wow, I keep seeing this thing. About 10 years after I left working for Jim, I've seen this exercise over and over again. My wife and I heard about this incredible seminar up in San Francisco. It was a 3-day personal development seminar, and it cost $5,000 per person to go to. We'd heard good things, so we paid our money, and we showed up. Started at 8:30 on a Friday morning. My wife and I got there. The guy got up and leading the seminar. He's glad you guys are here. I'm going to start this seminar by having you do a gratitude exercise. And he pulled out this exercise. And I'll have to tell you, I struggled at that time. I said, I can't believe it. I paid $5,000 to hear this stale old exercise. Jim taught me this 10 years ago. I've seen it in book after book after book after book. And I paid $5,000. I elbowed my wife. I said, should we leave and get our money back? I said, she looked at me and she gave me sort of a dirty look. I said, well, you know this, we've seen this exercise. She looked at me and she said, well, Greg, when was the last time you did it? I didn't like her much right then. A few minutes later, fuming, I elbowed her again. I said, I think we should leave. She got up and moved 3 seats over and kept working on the exercise. I knew I was in trouble. I thought, you know what? No matter how angry I get, it's not going to help. And if I leave, I'm just going to piss my wife off. I don't want to do that. I might as well do the frickin' exercise. I started working on the exercise. Today, when I woke up, I opened my journal, and on the inside page of my journal, I have the answers to these questions. And I start every day looking at the answers to these questions. What am I grateful for? What am I proud of? Who loves me? Who do I love? I will tell you, when you start your day that way, it's hard to have a bad day. I've been doing this for now 20 plus years. And it's changed almost everything in my life. I always wonder what took me 10 years of hearing about something to actually take action on it. Why did I have to hear it over and over and over again? And then pay $5,000 to actually do the exercise. Today I can tell you it's worth a lot more than the $5,000 I paid to do it. Here's the sad part. I'm not charging you $5,000. And the reason it's sad is that because I'm not charging you $5,000, most of you won't do it. You'll say, oh, yeah, I could, I should, but I'm going to pass, I'm not going to do it. Then focus on what you can control in your life. You can control what you spend, how much you save, what you think about. If you focus on the positive aspects of your life, everything is possible. And then forgive everybody that's ever done you wrong. And this is not to justify anybody that did anything to you. But if you forgive them, you can move on. It's not because they deserve forgiveness, it's so that you can move on in life. So what are the action steps to make this actually possible? First of all, understand that your philosophy is illustrated by what you do. So start looking and ask, what am I doing? Analyze it and say, what does my actions reflect in my philosophy? What is my philosophy about business, service, relationships, parenting, friendship, saving money, investing? All of these things, you have to develop a philosophy of. And think about what's the philosophy that's going to get you where you want to go. Now, our philosophy is refined by experience, by the people we are around. Now, we can learn from our own experiences, but here's the one thing I found. Our experiences take way too long. Let's say I decided I wanted to become a doctor, a medical doctor, but I did not really trust medical schools. So I wanted to learn everything myself. How long would it take me to become a proficient doctor if I didn't go to medical school? I just got some cadavers and started to figure it out all myself.
Never.
I'd be dead before I figured it out. See, our own experiences take way too long. Now, we want to capture our own experiences, analyze them, think about it. So start looking at your actions and ask yourself, what am I doing? Jot them down and ask, what's the philosophy that I'm living based on these actions? But then realize that good ideas don't interrupt you that often. So when you do come along, capture them. Write down, keep a journal of what's happening in your life. And unless you learn from your mistakes, you will repeat them over and over again. Then learn from other people's experience. Dr. J, the great basketball player, was asked, what's the key to his success as a basketball player? He said, I made a commitment to myself to demand more of myself than any coach could ever demand of me. What a great philosophy. And think, what are the philosophies I need to embrace? Jim said, Greg, one of the things I'd like you to do is think about your philosophy about reading. He said, I really believe a book a week will change your life. And I started to take that seriously. And for a couple of years, I read a book a week. Then I got married, got busy, had kids, all those things. And my wife stayed committed to reading a book a week. 4 or 5 years into our marriage, she and I went to this party down in San Diego. And she started talking to people, and she started talking about things I didn't know she knew. On the way home, I said, Janet, where'd you learn about that? She said, oh, I read this book. I said, well, what about this? She said, well, I read these 2 books about that. I realized that She was reading a book a week. I was reading a book a month, which meant I was falling 3 books a month behind. And when your wife is already a lot smarter than you are, and you're falling behind, you realize that could be trouble. So I made a commitment to read a book a week. I said, well, you know what, for the next year, I better need 2 books a week. Now, I never made it to 2 books a week consistently, but I have read a book a week pretty consistently for the last 35 years. And I will tell you, it's changed every aspect of my life. And it makes such a huge difference. Then, ask yourself, who am I around? Where have they got me headed? Maybe I need some new people to be in my life, some new associations to give me a new direction. Maybe I need to expand some association with the people that I'm having a positive impact from. And then there's some people that are moving me in the wrong direction. Maybe I need to limit my association with them. I also came to the realization that there are some people I need to disassociate with. They are just so negative, I cannot afford the influence they have in my life. Now, this can be hard. I know for me, it was hard. I was related to some of the people I needed to disassociate with. But I had to make that choice. The people you're around create the failure of success that pull you down or push you up. And this is very clear. If you have any doubt, read the book Grit. The people you hang around with have a huge impact on your life, and we don't even think about it. In the end, your philosophy determines how you feel about yourself. And how we feel about our own self-worth affects us in a huge way on a daily basis. Doing the best in everything you can will make your self-worth soar. What undermines your self-worth is doing less than your best. If you could do your best and you only give 90%, that starts to become a habit. And I want you to understand, it will mess with your mind and your own self-worth. If you give your relationship less than your best, if you give your wealth building less than your best, it messes with your mind. In the end, the results are the name of the game. Let me give you a formula for great success. Take heavy action on a good idea. Talent times effort squared equals skill. Talent is limited. Effort, you can put in a ton more effort. The difference between people that do extraordinarily well and just average is usually effort. If you have any doubt, read the book Talent is Overrated. It says if you actually look at the genetics of great athletes, great musicians, great business people, their genetics are nothing special. The commonality is that they all put massive effort into their success. In high school, the average person that makes it into the NBA spends 3 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week, working on their basketball skills. It's not they are more talented. They put in more effort. And that's so important. Then, once you have some skill, if you take focused action on that skill consistently, you get achievement. That's how you become massively successful. Now, if you want to lead a mediocre life, here's the easy philosophy on how to do it. Think about what you could do. Think about what you should do. Then, don't do them. Could you study more for your finals next week? Should you? Don't. What's the consequence? Could you save consistently to become wealthy? Should you? Don't. Could you read a book a week? Should you read a book a week? Could you do that gratitude exercise? Should you? Don't. It won't change your life. So, think about what you could do, should do, then don't do it. I promise you'll have an average life. Success is simple. Find something you can do and then work incredibly hard at it. The subtlety of each day is what trips most people up. At the end of each day, we have to look at it and say, did today stack for me or against me? And the key is to understand that every discipline affects every other discipline. The little things make a huge difference. Start with the small stuff. Should you exercise a little bit every day? Could you? See, if you start there, 10 push-ups a day, run a mile, little tiny things done consistently over time, start small and let it expand. That leads to self-mastery. Start by controlling all your own emotions. You've got to understand, you've got to educate your emotions to be successful. It's not what happens, but what we do about it. In every situation, ask yourself, what can I think differently about this so I feel better about it? Once I learned how to do this, it changed so many different things. Because we realize we're creating the reality of everything we face. The way we frame problems in our life influences how effective we are at dealing with it. Ask yourself, what can I do in this situation to make it better? Now, a couple of quick things. Understand that negative is normal. It's not successful, but it is normal. Then, eliminate the diseases of attitude. First of all, one of the worst diseases is pessimism. Always looking on the dark side. There's a wonderful book called Hard Optimism. If you look at the positive things of life, you live longer, get richer, are happier, just because you are positive. Then get rid of jealousy and envy. Never be jealous or envious of anybody for anything out there. Celebrate their success. Also get rid of guilt, doubt, worry, and fear. These are diseases that will kill you. Let me ask you something. How much worry will change something? If you spend an hour worrying as intensely, as hard as you possibly could, will it change the outcome? If you have fear about something, will it change the outcome? No. Guilt, doubt, worry, fear are all internal things that change absolutely nothing. Once you understand this, you realize this is crazy if you do any of them. It's mentally nuts. Why? Because you're doing something that will not help. Here's the thing. If you're worried about something, take action. So ask, what can I do to make the situation better? Also, get rid of indecision and overcaution. Let me tell you, life is scary. It's also risky. It is so risky, none of you are going to get out of it alive. We're all going one place. Since we're going to go there, we might as well give it a go. See what you can do with it. Also, get rid of the disease of complaining. This is one of the most negative diseases on the planet. Jim absolutely hated complaining. He said, Greg, if there's any one thing I get you to stop, it's stop complaining about anything. Because whatever you complain about, you will attract more in your life. Just give it up. You know, you conquer the diseases of attitude by just your thinking habits and refining your philosophy. Learn to be happy with what you have while you pursue what you want. Then understand that personal development is a never-ending process. And once you understand that, you can accomplish any goal. Here's how to do it. Be totally honest about exactly where you are in relationship to your goal. If you're broke, say, I'm broke. My goal is to become worth X million dollars. Now, then be crystal clear about what you want to accomplish and why that is important to you. Earl Nightingale had it right. He said the human mind will not reach toward achievement until it has a clear vision of where it is headed. It is then the switch is turned on, the current begins to flow, and the power to turn your vision into reality starts to take place. Then, every 6 months to a year, you need to reevaluate your goals, your reasons, and move forward. Look at your life in every aspect of it. Think about what the philosophy you have in each one of these areas is and where you are going. I'm going to leave you with a little book recommendation called U Squared. It's only 28 pages. It'll take you 15-20 minutes to read, but it's life-changing. It's a high-velocity formula for multiplying your personal effectiveness in quantum leaps. First of all, it says you can make a quantum leap in improvement if you are willing to open yourself up. Then, we've got to be willing to reframe our ideas about ourselves and how we fit into the world. We've got to refine our philosophy. Now, it's taking a risk, and it can be scary. And we are people that want things to be predictable, but we don't know how to move forward without moving into new opportunities. So we've got to be willing to set ourselves up to take that risk. It's that explosive jump in productivity and risk out there. Vigorously search out new behaviors. Ask, what can I do differently? This will change everything. More of the same will give you more of the same. Ask, how can I do things differently? If you do this, it will make a huge difference. Act as if your success is certain. If you're going to doubt anything, doubt your limits. Then understand you don't have to know exactly how you're going to get there. All you have to do is figure out why you want to go there and where you want to go. After you're committed to making it happen, it will become apparent. And this will make such a huge difference for you. I want to wrap up with what stops most of us from truly reaching for our full greatness is because our lives are pretty good. I grew up on a farm. I don't know if you ever lived on a farm. It's work. I always knew I didn't want to be a farmer because it was way too hard. And I still think that, unfortunately, most of us have it so good that we don't push ourselves to be the best of our ability. I want you to think about what you want in your life and ask yourself, what do you really want and why? Stay focused on what you want and why you want it. Find something that gets you excited about that. And when you do that, everything in life becomes easier and more successful. clarify your values and your philosophy. And if you want to do this, there's a wonderful little exercise that I put together. And if you go to personalvaluesworksheet.com, you can download that worksheet, and I recommend that you take the time to do that. Finally, write a one-page letter outlining precisely where you want to go. Give yourself a clear description of the outcome you want to create, and write it as if it was already a reality. Then cut out some pictures, and then every day, read that letter, look at the pictures, and just mentally spend 10 minutes visualizing your life as if you had already accomplished everything you wrote down. And if you will do this consistently every day for 90 days, it will change everything in your life. A couple of quick things to avoid. Be aware of the negative Nellies. There's lots of people that tell you you can't do it. Focus on what you want in your life and why you want to do this. And maybe the best reason is, why not? Why not you go out there and accomplish everything you want? And the key is to start now. I know we ran a little late tonight. I hope you found this valuable. If you get some time, I'd love some feedback. Send me an email, and we will see you next week for the final. Thank you, and have a good evening.